Well, here we are on Morecambe Promenade on a glorious sunny morning, and here I am as well, Peter Wade, Morecambe's one-time tourist guide, and we're standing next to who else but the statue of Eric Morecambe in classic pose. He's very often with somebody else. It's unusual this morning that there isn't somebody alongside Eric doing the dance, but we'll do for company, I suppose, for the moment. And Eric here was unveiled by Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II, and the two of them shared a common birthday. They were both born in 1926, and I've often wondered whether Her Majesty had a secret unfulfilled wish, and that was to be part of one of Ernie's plays, the ones what he wrote, as part of the character there. So the Queen would actually be able to appear. And she was known well for her interest in amateur dramatics and so on, so I'm sure she could have taken the part very well indeed. So what's the second best thing? It's to come here and unveil a statue to Eric, which is what she did, and she didn't wait to be invited. She said, "May I please come and unveil this statue?" Well, who could refuse? And so here he is, a figure created by a sculptor called Graham Ibison, and we have really the perfect photo opportunity, because Eric's doing his dance there, and it just wants somebody to stand next to him and do the pose. He's dressed for bird watching, which was one of his great interests, and there is actually a hide over at Leighton Moss, sort of memorial to Eric there as well. Well, why does Eric not look out over this glorious bay that we can see? But in a way it's right, because he's looking back over all of his life, really. So he's looking at the buildings and so on with which he was connected. So down the promenade there, familiar building to many, Morecambe Winter Gardens. And Eric would be the entertainment during the intervals of shows. So the curtains would close, the audience would be off for ice creams and things, all go a bit quiet, and then the curtain would slightly open, and a rather gawky young gentleman would appear, sometimes in a rather odd costume, and he would do a song, a comic song, to keep the audience happy. Another place connected with Eric, it's not really what it was now, but along the promenade there was a cafe. It was called the Cafe Roy. I remember it when I was a boy, because they used to have these incredibly big pies in the window, and the pies would be steaming as well. So it was a place that very much sold itself, and it was really a highlight of the promenade in its way. But Eric's mum Sadie was a waitress there in the Cafe Roy. And then there was another location behind us here on the old promenade, and that was the Central Pier. And again, Eric's mum had a part-time job there. So she would be, I suppose, a kind of cleaner, really. She'd go round the auditorium after a show, gathering up anything that was discarded, but especially gathering up any programmes from the show, because she had a cunning plan, and that was to go home get the iron out, iron the programmes so they looked brand new, all set to go back to the central pier where she could sneakily sell them again. So Eric's here commanding in a way his past, but if we start to go inland, then we actually find there's quite a lot of it still there. So that's our job today, to go and explore a bit of the past of Eric Morecambe, except of course he's not Eric Morecambe at all, he's Eric Bartholomew. We detoured onto Station Road, if my memory serves me right, and behind me here is a school, which today is Morecambe Bay Primary School, but people of a certain generation will remember it as Euston Road School. Not just a primary, it was a secondary school as well, and it was here that Eric went to school, or most of his formal education anyway, although he started off at Lancaster Road Primary. Eric didn't have a very distinguished school career. He described his time at school as 7 years hard labour. So he got low marks in pretty much most of his exams, and he generally didn't realise there was any point to doing the exams, so he didn't even show up. So it's hardly a surprise that his school reports are not the most flattering. His mum, Sadie, got very anxious about Eric's academic career, or rather his lack of an academic career. And she arranged an appointment with the headmaster of the school. And she offered to pay for Eric to have some private lessons. The headmaster was not encouraging. It would be money down the drain, Mrs. Bartholomew, money down the drain. And so she didn't bother. Instead, of course, concentrating on what Eric was good at, which was singing and dancing. Many years later, Eric caught up with his erstwhile schoolmates when he was awarded Doctor of Literature at Lancaster University. He made good in the end. We're standing at the rear of what used to be Morecambe's Odeon Cinema, now a DIY store, but importantly, a building that has recently been listed at the behest, I think, of the 20th Century Society. We're actually at the back of the old cinema, but for those of a certain disposition, this was the way where you could sneak in without payment. The trick was that one of your gang would go and buy a ticket and then head off to the toilet and opened the rear door. Well, would Eric Bartholomew get involved in such trickery? Not quite, no, but there were a few misdemeanours. The Odeon here was Eric's local cinema, I suppose it's fair to say, so it would show a different film every week. There was a children's cinema club as well, and so it was a very popular kind of family place, really, a family cinema. However, Eric and his rather wayward cousin decided one day to have a bit of an adventure. So they invested in a ticket for the Circle, which of course would cost a fair old bit. And then, armed with pea shooters, they set about firing onto the stalls below. Until, of course, one of the usherettes, armed with a torch, apprehended the two culprits, and they were duly ejected from the Odeon, never to darken its doors again. Except for one thing. Eric and Ernie made 3 feature films, and those 3 films were shown at various times here on the big screen in Morecambe Odeon. And I remember myself going to see those very films all those years ago. Well, what we see, much altered, of course, over the years, but you can get a sense of the layout. So what we see are where the entrance doors were. Got a whole series of them. So for a popular film, they'd have queues for the show. And just by me here, this is where the box office was. And then, armed with your tickets, you'd go up the stairs here and either upstairs to the balcony, and it was quite a swish staircase, I have to say as well, or the penny plane seats down in the stalls below. But a very modern building. Certainly a lot of Morecambe is Victorian, but here, following in the wake, of course, of the Midland Hotel, you've got the 1930s making themselves felt on the Morecambe seafront and inland as well. Well, we've come now onto Queen Street, and this was the site of the Plaza Cinema just across the road from us, and the surrounding building was the Plaza building as we know it today. And in an upper room, there was the Plaza School of Dancing. And it was there that Eric learned to move, I think it's fair to say. And if you watch an old Morecambe and Wise show, it's actually full of dance and movement. I mean, the famous bits with Previn, for example. Angela Rippon, she was a very staid and serious newsreader, and nobody would have imagined that she had legs. And then suddenly she agrees to appear on the Morecambe and Wise show, and there she is dancing for all she's worth as if she were Ginger Rogers alongside Eric, who was of course Fred Astaire. And the two of them, perfect dancers, and Eric really was. So if Eric had ever entered Strictly, I rather think he'd have won. Well, there's not much sign of the old Plaza School of Dancing now. Probably just some empty, echoing rooms upstairs. But there we are. That's where Eric met his Ginger Rogers, a young lady called Molly Bunting, and they made a very good partnership, and Eric made his mark on the stage as a result of it. We're on Morecambe Street. Where else could we possibly be? And the thing is, of course, that Eric Bartholomew took as his stage name Eric Morecambe, which was quite a bit of a good bit of free advertising for an up-and-coming seaside town. Well, where did Eric learn his trade? Well, one of the places were a bit like the nightclub behind me, which started life as a music hall. There was a market downstairs, and upstairs there was a stage and a place for performers and so on. Well, in Morecambe's music halls, and we've got one of them behind me here, Eric was able to try out some of his latest material, and he'd be paid, well, not that handsomely really, but he settled for sixpence and a pea and pie supper. As things went on, he commanded rather larger fees, anything up to 5 shillings, which was pretty good going. And if he managed to get, say, 3 shows a week, he was actually earning more money than his dad. Well, what sort of performance did he give? Well, it was a comic song. It was made famous by a music hall star called Ella Shields. And the song was called I'm Not All There. So Eric would play this rather gangly youth, strangely dressed. He'd have a beret. He'd have a sort of jacket. He'd have trousers, striped ones, which only went down as far as his knees. So he had bare feet or boots or whatever. And importantly, his prop was a lollipop, but not a real one. It was made of wood, and it had a bite taken out of it as well. So maybe that was poor Eric hoping to get fed at the end of it. But there it was, quite a successful song, and something that he could adapt to himself as well. And Eric would take this round town, various, I wouldn't say nightclubs, but the music halls and so on. And also talent competitions. There were a lot of these. They were very popular. Eric would enter them with the aim of getting prize money at the end. The Bartholomew family would come along in force to cheer Eric on. And at the end of that routine, what could a talent competition judge do but award Eric the first prize?